So welcome everybody. I'm Kim Hosen. I'm with the Prince William Conservation Alliance, and thanks for being here with us tonight. And with Rob Orrison, who is going to fill us in on the mysteries of Cockpit Point. Before we get started, Rob's going to do a presentation, and hopefully we can save our questions and comments till the end. During the presentation, please feel free to put comments and questions, whatever, in the chat. And when we're after the presentation and we're going to do Q&A, you can raise your hand, which I think is on the bottom. It's a little yellow hand, or you can just wave your hands around and I'll see you, or you can put in the chat, I want to ask a question. So there's three ways to participate because we're looking forward. And I just want to say before we move on that the Prince William Conservation Alliance is able to bring these programs to you in the community free of charge, thanks to the support of our members and friends. And I just want to share the screen with you just for a minute. And here's our website, and we put our projects or programs. You can always check in here and see what's going on. And then if you feel like this is something you'd like to support, we have a donate button up here, and you can donate safely online. It's very easy to do. And we totally appreciate your support. We couldn't do these things without you. So I'm going to quickly hand the program over to Rob Orrison, who is the head of our Natural Resource Division, which is now part of the Parks, Recreation and Tourism.
Long title.
Yeah, it is. I know.
We're actually historic preservation. We're hoping to get a natural resource division at some point, but
well, we'd be nice. Yeah, and actually, before you start, I will mention it to everybody that the county doesn't have any employees that are experts in natural resource management. So that is really a big hole, and we hope that at some time soon that will go on the budget, at least one person, because we're getting some natural area parks, and we certainly want to be able to maintain high quality conditions. So I'm sorry, Rob, it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. And let me go ahead and get my screen share going here. It worked earlier, right, Kim? So we're good.
Yeah, so we're good. We know that's right.
There we go. My favorite photograph from this piece of property, which is not the historic part. Well, it's all historic, right? But this is looking east. I'm looking west from the railroad track that we'll talk about a little bit later. But thank you, Kim, for inviting me tonight, and I also want to thank you for inviting everyone, different organizations, different people to discuss three historic properties in Prince William County. We had Julia talking about reforestation of Bristol Battlefield, Bill, my co-worker, talking about the Barnes House, and then I'm here tonight. So I really appreciate you highlighting the great work that I think my staff does here with the Historic Preservation Division. And as Kim mentioned, we are part of Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism. That's still new to me. We were in Public Works up till 2 years ago. My former supervisor, Brendan Hannafin, who may be sneaking on here at some point, is also with Parks and Rec, and it's taken us some time to say Parks and Rec instead of Public Works. We're happy to be in Parks and Rec, and we really enjoy working with our new colleagues over there. So I'll go ahead and get started. So my goal tonight is not to give you an in-depth history of Cockpit Point and all of its land uses, because it's pretty extensive. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the important Civil War history that took place there, because that's one of the main reasons why this land was preserved, and also talk about the conditions on the property there now. I know some of you, like Mr. Brickley, has been out there and seen the property, but I don't think a lot of you have. So my challenge tonight is to kind of show you this property virtually and show you some of the great resources that exist out there and some of the great opportunities I think we as a community have with this property. So this is a very up-to-date Google Earth image of Eastern Prince William County. If you see my cursor, there's my cursor. Interstate 95, of course, we all know that lovely road. Come east Route 1, Dumfries. You got Quantico Creek here and the Potomac River here. Of course, we all know about Possum Point Power Plant. If you just go north of Possum Point Power Plant about a quarter, half a mile, you get to the Cockpit Point Civil War Park property here that was proffered to the county a few years ago by Potomac Shores. And you can see Potomac Shores right here. This is actually filled in a lot more since this aerial was taken. But this property here was part of the Potomac Shores development and was proffered to the county as open space and historic resource protection area. The Potomac, I always mess up the name of the Potomac National Heritage Scenic Trail, but it runs really close to this property. We're hoping that maybe one day we run it to this property, as it's right, along the Potomac River. But it's accessible to the Potomac, accessible to the Heritage Trail, and of course, really close to some really neighborhoods here that will probably really have a high demand for open space and passive recreation. One of the biggest questions we always get is, where does the name Cockpit Point come from? And no one really knows. There's lots of different theories about this. Supposedly there was a cockfighting ring that took place somewhere on this property at some point. We're talking 18th century, early on. There are some references to it in Maryland newspapers. People going across the Potomac to do cockfighting here in Virginia on somewhere in this vicinity on this property. But other than that, there really is no hard evidence to why they call this particular part of the area Cockpit Point. But it's probably the #1 question we get when people come out there or ask us about Cockpit Point is, why is it called Cockpit Point? This is an aerial of the Prince William County shoreline from the Maryland side. You can see Cockpit Point here with my cursor. The land that the county now owns is right here. You move down south, you can see Quantico Creek, Shipping Point, which is now on the Marine Corps base, and obviously Chapawamsa Creek here. So this is the Prince William County shoreline from Cockpit down to Chapawamsa. I put this on there because in 1861, a Union colonel got into a balloon, which was rare at that point in time, and lofted above the Maryland shoreline here to draw the Confederate batteries along the Potomac River that I'm going to talk about here in a few seconds. In this aerial here, the Air and Space Museum commemorated this event in 2011. It's one of the first air reconnaissance that the United States military had done. And so they had an exhibit at the Air and Space Museum about it. This is the modern day view from the balloon, they believe, where the balloon was located when it took off. So it's a pretty rare, it was a rare sketch. I have it later in the presentation. This is a modern photograph from that same viewpoint. So if you take a look here at the Potomac River, let's jump back to 1861 real quick. Of course, the American Civil War kicks off there in the spring of 1861. So here the Potomac River divided not just Virginia and Maryland, not just the North and the South, but also divided the Confederate States of America as they knew it and the United States of America. The Potomac River here, if you look, is pretty narrow compared. You can see the river kind of broadens out in this area. The river is about 3/4 of a mile to a mile wide in this section here. Keep in mind too, for many of you all who I know like to go boating out in the river is very shallow at most points. There is a deep river channel that runs through it that allows ocean-going vessels up the river, but for the most part, the river is pretty shallow. Here along the Prince William County part of the Potomac, the river channel runs really close to the Prince William Bank, so the western bank of the Potomac River. And that is important as we discuss the American Civil War. So in April of 1861, authorities in Richmond already had men up here in Prince William County, military soldiers from across Virginia, building batteries and entrenchments in Prince William County, expecting some kind of invasion from Maryland into Virginia. Robert E. Lee at that point in time was actually commander of the Virginia forces, not the Confederate forces, Virginia forces. And he actually ordered batteries to be built along the shore of the Potomac River. The reason for that is twofold. One, they wanted to block all the commercial shipping that took place on the Potomac River. but 80% of all of the goods and wares that came into Washington, D.C. came up the Potomac River. Only one rail line served the city at that point in time. So 80% of everything's coming up that river. So if the Confederates could blockade the river, stop the traffic, that's going to cause some hardship. Also, the Maryland side of the river is very important at this point, in 1861. It was still not determined if Maryland was going to stay with the North or join the South. This part of Maryland was very pro-Southern. You had very large landholders with large enslaved populations on them. Unlike Northern and Western Maryland, which were much more smaller farmers, very few enslaved people, this part of Maryland was very pro-Southern. So Virginia was trying very hard to keep this part of Maryland engaged and try to keep them, hopefully to pull the rest of the state to the South. Also, lots of trading took place here. Lots of arms and goods went between Maryland and Virginia at the very beginning of the war. So for the Confederates to control this section of the river was very important in 1861. And of course, as we know, Prince William County in July of 1861 was the site of the first major battle of the Civil War, at the Battle of Manassas for Bull Run. And so from July 1861 through March 1862, Prince William County was a very large fortified military encampment. From Gainesville to Brentsville, Manassas Junction, all the way down here to Dumfries and Triangle. And so it's a very heavily fortified area. So you can imagine Prince William's a very small community. You can imagine 40,000 men being encamped in these farms and in these neighborhoods. It was obviously very tragic and devastating for much of these farmers who lived here. But this river was very important to both sides. Obviously, the North wanted to open up this river and the South wanted to close it. This is one of the few actual drawings we have from the American Civil War of Cockpit Point. This is a drawing from a Union newspaper correspondent. You can see there's the Confederate flag there, and then this is the gun battery out in the river. It's not 100% accurate. It was much higher, much broader, as I'll show you later on. But the good thing about the fact that this property has such great Civil War history is it's well documented. There's lots of drawings, lots of letters from soldiers on both sides of the river, Union and Confederate, that talk about it, that allow us, hopefully one day when we open up this property to the public, we can actually interpret the stories of the men that were there on both sides. Here's another famous sketch showing Cockpit Point across the river. This is from the Maryland side. The guns that were used in the gun batteries. So a gun battery would be a very large gun with men who would man that piece of artillery. Very large artillery batteries were placed on Cockpit Point, and these guns could reach up to 2 miles, which of course Maryland would have been easily accessible. So very often throughout, from October 1861 to March 1862, you had the Confederates at Cockpit Point shelling Maryland, and the Union soldiers on the Maryland side firing back. So you have lots of accounts of soldiers talking about being awakened in the middle of the night with shells raining in over top of them. The importance of what these guns do is pretty amazing. So as I said, 80% of all of the commercial traffic that goes into Washington, D.C. before the Civil War comes up the river. By October of 1861, the U.S. Navy commander of the Potomac River closes the river. What that means is if you are a commercial captain and you want to take your ship up the river to Washington, D.C., you can do so, but the military, the Navy, will no longer guarantee your safety. And so keep in mind, lots of these captains own their ships. They also are responsible for what's on them. So it's a very huge financial risk if you own your ship and you're responsible for the items on that ship to run the gauntlet, so to speak. As I said, you have several batteries along the Potomac River. You have not just Cockpit Point, you also have Freestone Point that some of you probably have seen up at least Savannah State Park. And then you had two large gun batteries on a modern day Marine Corps base, Quantico. So we had around 20 guns, 20 large guns, cannon, lining the Virginia shore that blockaded this river. Funny enough, we always joke about this, me and my colleagues at work, when we give tours of the property. We've estimated around 10,000 to 12,000 shots were fired from these batteries. And of those, maybe 50 hit something. So not very accurate, but still, you know, for these commercial Navy captains, they did not want to risk going up the river and losing their ships. So you'll see Navy ships, the United States Navy, go up and down the river at will. These Confederates are very bad gunners. They just cannot hit the ships all that well. They do hit a few, but they are able to go up and down the Potomac at will. But the commercial traffic is what's cut off. And this is very damaging to the Lincoln administration. As some of you all know, the Lincoln administration at the beginning of the Civil War orders a blockade of all southern ports. So Lincoln is calling for his Navy to close off all the ports in the South so they could kind of slowly strangle the Southern economy. The British ambassador, who's in Washington, D.C. at this time, around the fall of 1861, makes a comment to Lincoln that it's funny how you've ordered the blockade of all the southern ports, but the only city that's blockaded is your own. So it's a really kind of, it's a burr in the heel of Abraham Lincoln that this blockade is going on, and that for some reason, his Navy and his Army cannot clear it. They won't clear it until March of 1862. Really quick, this is a modern sketch of a historic drawing showing you eastern Prince William County and all the campsites that were located. I'll use my cursor. Here's Cockpit Point. I'm circling here at the bottom. So the Potomac River is off to the right. Town of Dumfries is here. This would be Kings Highway, Telegraph Road, Route 1 today. There's lots of camps up here where Montclair is located. There's a couple of markers on the Montclair golf course that show you where the 6th North Carolina was located. So I show this map because eastern Prince William from Quantico all the way up to about Lisa Van State Park was covered with thousands of Confederate soldiers. Men from Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and they're going to experience their very first winter, Virginia winter, they've ever had. Many of these men never have seen snow before. And it wasn't an unusually cold winter in 1861, but it did have several documented snowstorms. And we know some of these men, you know, this was like kids in a candy store, right? Think about when you saw your first snow. Some of us don't remember, we're so young, but I have 2 young kids, and when it snows, it's like the most exciting thing. Just imagine grown men enjoying snow in the deep South. They're probably pretty cold doing it, not used to these cold weathers. But the whole eastern part of the county would have been covered campsites. Many of these camps have been destroyed by housing developments in the county. A lot of these camps were, had archaeology surveys done, and we do have a lot of the artifacts in our collection from them. There are some still camps existent on Marine Corps Base Quantico that have been protected. But there's also, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, some of the best preserved camps from 1861 are on this property that we're talking about tonight. So another important reason for us to protect it. This image here is one of the most rarest images from the American Civil War. It's one of the few images of Confederate soldiers or Texas soldiers that show them in camp. Most photographed soldiers of the American Civil War come from the North because they had the photographers travel with the armies. You don't see that as much in the South. But this is a winter hut built somewhere on Cherry Hill, somewhere in that vicinity on the Cherry Hill Peninsula. And you can see these are all just kind of common soldiers dressed in random different clothing. You can see that winter hut behind them. That is probably built from logs from trees they cut, from fence rails they took. And we also know several of the farms and plantations along the eastern seaboard of Prince William were ravaged by soldiers who took things from the farm. We have a couple of accounts of a lady in Dumfries who would write the governor of Richmond saying she's more afraid of the Confederates in her neighborhood than the Yankees across the river because they're destroying her farm. So to a common person who probably doesn't have a whole lot of political interest in what's going on, she was more worried about her farm being destroyed. So if you look at this picture, you can see these cabins and these buildings were pretty extensive, and they were built for the long haul. And we have the remnants of these on that property, which is pretty amazing. So this is a modern map. We had a battlefield management plan, battlefield study done by URS several years ago when we acquired the property. And one battle took place. So not many battles are taking place along the Potomac River. As I said, it's just more of soldiers on the Virginia shore shooting at the soldiers on the northern shore, just kind of randomly. But on January 2nd of 1862, the United States Navy finally orders ships down to Cockpit Point to engage the battery. This yellow circle shows you where the battery is. This is the Potomac River. These little squares, there's one here and one off the map, show you where the U.S. Navy ships were located. The orange triangles show you field of fire. So the batteries at Cockpit Point can reach all the way in as far into Maryland. It's pretty extensive. And you can see the ships obviously couldn't fire as far. But the Navy ships come down, 3 ships come down on January 2nd, 1862, with the mission of taking out these gun batteries so they can open the river back up. After about 8 hours, firing back and forth for 8 hours, they do knock out lots of the guns. So the Navy ships are successful in destroying some of the batteries. That night, they go back north to Washington, D.C. at the Navy Yard. They refit, resupply their ships. They come back the next day. The batteries are all fixed. The Navy commander basically writes Gideon Wells, who's the Navy secretary at the time, and says, this is a waste of our time. Because as much as we can destroy what they have, unless we send the Army in to clear those batteries, the Confederates are going to keep repairing everything and just be back the very next day. So at that point in time, you have a logjam, politically speaking, in D.C., with the Army under a man named George McClellan, who refuses to send the Army in, and the Navy, who refuses to go back down there. So basically, from January to March, you really have no effort here to clear out the Confederate batteries along the Potomac River. And so that blockade is going to continue on up into March of 1862. What happens in March of 1862 is the Confederates do leave, but it's not because the Navy pushes them out. It's not because the Army pushes them out. It's because the Confederate commander, who's named General Joe Johnston, decides that this is a very bad spot to be. His army was the eastern flank of their army. The eastern end of his army was on the Potomac River. They ran all the way through Centerville and all the way to Leesburg. And he figured that the Union Army at that point was so big they could easily outflank them, and he was very much exposed this far north. So he decided to pull his entire army of around 50,000 Confederate soldiers that expanded from Leesburg to here in Dumfries back to Fredericksburg. So when the Confederate Army pulls out, these batteries are left empty. The Confederates will have very little time to destroy them. They roll one gun off the shore, and this drawing here done after the Confederates leave. You can see a gun here. I'm circling with my cursor. They are actually showing you one of the guns the Confederates have pushed over the edge. The Confederates have tried to blow up the guns. They tried to blow up the camps. The Union soldiers that come across write about how campfires were still burning, how some of the stoves were still warm. A lot of these Confederate soldiers, being brand new soldiers and not knowing how those wars going to be so long, brought all their luggage with them, brought all this stuff. And they were given very few hours to get everything together. So the Union soldiers are going through these camps, and there's just luggage and just stuff everywhere these soldiers had to leave behind because they were given literally a few hours to get out. And their goal at that point was to destroy the guns as much as they could so the Union couldn't use them later on. So this sketch here shows, I can never say it right, the Wyandank, which is one of the steamers on the Potomac River, trying to pull some of the gun tubes here off the gun batteries at Cockpit Point. Down the cliff is still there, so they can kind of secure the guns and use them for their own purposes. So after March of 1862, there really is, even though Prince William will still be in the middle of the American Civil War between southern soldiers marching through the property. Obviously, Second Manassas was fought in August 1862. Battle of Bristow Station was fought in 1863. Nothing else happens really in these gun batteries. They are abandoned and they are left. And what will happen is, if you leave something alone long enough, nature will reclaim itself, right? So we start seeing the woods come back up and start seeing nature reclaiming these gun batteries that are still sitting there today. So this is a 1937 aerial of the area of Cockpit Point. I know a lot of you all have played on the county website to see the aerials, some of the best images we have of early Prince William County. I'll point some things out to you here using my cursor. You can see Cockpit Point is identified right here. This is the actual point. If you come down here, this is what was called as Possum Nodes. Those Civil War gun batteries are located actually on Possum Nodes, but all the soldiers called it Cockpit Point. So it's always been referred to as Cockpit Point, even though the points were farther north. The land that the county owns is a little pie-shaped piece here, eastern parcel, and then there's a western parcel that covers all of these woodlands here. And of course, this very large pond here. And there's a smaller pond that's just off our property on Dominion Power property right here. So really from 1862 until the 1880s, 1887, very little happens in this part of Prince William County. In the 1880s, the rail line at that point in time that went from Richmond to Fredericksburg to Playa was extended all the way up to Washington, D.C. They ran that rail line, the old RF&P, right along the shoreline here. And you can see right here, the old rail line continued north. But on our property here, on the county's property, it's along the shore. And that rail line embankment is still there. You can still see it right now. I walked it a few days ago before our latest snowstorm. That embankment is still there. But you can imagine that rail line had lots of trouble, right? It flooded, mudslides, there's erosion issues. So really by 1937, in the early 20th century, the railroad company built the modern line that's still there today. That's this right here. So this obviously is much more inland, much more, less prone to flooding and environmental issues that you find along the river. But what that rail line did is it dammed up this little creek right here into this pond. And this pond is that pond on my cover slide at the very beginning. I'll show another photograph to you in a second. But so we have a beautiful pond on the property that was created by the railroad when the railroad bank was put in and dammed up that creek. But you can see there's nothing really left. There's nothing else here at that point in time. Fast forward to the 1979 aerial, you can see now that the asphalt plant, I call it the tank farm, as we call it locally, was built. And that's still there now. That's now owned by Blue Knight. And so this is the tanks that are still there today. And then this is the tank farm here. And then obviously by that point in time, Cockpit Point Road, which is there today, was built to access the tank farm. But look at the property that we're talking about that's being preserved. This piece here, and then this piece here. Other than the rail line and this tank farm property here, nothing has been disturbed since the 1860s. It never was farmed after the Civil War, according to any of the records that we have. It was never farmed. So most of these trees are pretty old growth trees. And if you ever walk out there, you can see that. One thing that did almost happen to this property on the eastern portion, the Washington Post had an ownership interest in that parcel, and they had plans to build a paper pulp factory because obviously you have access to deep water, so you can get ships up here. You have access to the railroad. So way before that internet, right? They had plans to build a paper pulp factory there, which would have been a horrible idea for many different reasons, right? Like obviously today that would have been an empty factory that we would have to take care of somehow. But obviously it would have destroyed all of the historic and natural resources on that property. And because that railroad's there, it's not really inviting development land. It's not something that would be very, something that a developer would be interested in developing because you have this railroad. And the land out there, I know some of you have walked it, it's very hilly, it's very lots of low lows, high peaks in this property. So it would have been very good land to develop. And this is the land today. This is from our county mapper. These two green parcels are the ones I've been talking about. This little parcel here is where the gun batteries are located. There are 4 large gun batteries that I've been talking about here along the Potomac River. Campsites are all through the backside. And then this parcel here was added to the proffer. The original proffer was this. Then later, as you all know, Potomac Shores has gone through many reiterations of development, way before I was even working here principally. You know, so other KSI and other developments have had plans with this area, but the proffer was expanded to include this parcel here, which has got some of, like I said, some of the more natural environmental resource properties that, resources that we would like to really kind of open up to the public. And then you can see, of course, Potomac Shores is obviously being built around it here. Really quick, just show you some photographs of what is there now. It's very hard to take photographs of Civil War earthworks because all you see is leaves, trees, and mounds of dirt. And I promise you, this is one of the bomb proofs for the gun battery. So if you had a large Civil War gun, you'd have bomb proofs off the side that were covered ways and covered rooms for them to store, gunpowder and shells for that gun. So this is one of the bomb proofs here. Obviously, the roof is collapsed in. You can kind of see the walkway here. The bomb-proof room was here. In the background, you can see the Potomac River. You can see how close they were to the bluff. Here's another image of the largest battery number 3, we call it. This gun here, we know came from the Navy Yard in Norfolk when the Confederates captured that in the spring of 1861. They sent a lot of those really big seacoast guns up to these batteries. And it's hard to tell here, but the bomb-proof, the hallway to the bomb-proof is right here. But this is one big open space, and the cannon would sit the way my cursor is going. The river's off to my left, looking at the screen. Really big battery for a Civil War preservationist, people who studied the Civil War. These are really rare earthworks. We had the National Park Service come up about 6 years ago, and they're some of the rarest earthworks that people have seen that are in such great, pristine condition. And here's a view from one of the batteries of the Potomac River. You can see Maryland off into the distance. Really quick, talk about some of the nature. Sorry for the grainy photograph. I could not find a really good photograph of one of the bald eagles that we have out there, but we have several bald eagles that are there. We know we have at least 2 nests on the property near the pond, but this is one of the photographs we were able to get of one of the eagles out there. The Audubon Society, some of you all may be involved with this, have done annual walks of the property, taking a bird inventory. Nearly 180 different species of birds have been identified on the property, which is pretty amazing. A lot of migrating birds, obviously, up and down Potomac here on this property as well. But something that's really a piece of property that we think is very important to preserve, not just for the history, but obviously for the natural environment as well. Here's some of the woodlands. These are some of the bigger trees, but try to take a photograph showing, this is last spring, showing the lowland and then these high peaks. These are really high hills and ridges that are in the property. Kind of hard to see through the leaves here, but the land is very hilly, which will allow for some great view sheds. If we ever get trails on this property, you can see some great view sheds of the Potomac River in the distance. But you can see we have 2 little streams at the bottom. There's one here at the bottom of the screen that runs through the property as well. And here's that pond I showed you earlier. This is the pond this is looking west from the railroad tracks. That creek that ran to the railroad that comes off Potomac Shores. The railroad embankment kind of creates a dam. And so this pond here is pretty big. It goes back into the left here. It goes back straight and then back off to the right. So it's pretty, if you step back in here, and the train's not going, you don't even know you're in Eastern Prince William County. It's a nice place to kind of sit back and relax and kind of collect your thoughts. Let's talk about challenges. This is the pond 2 weeks ago. Off to the left here, you can see the railroad. That's the railroad embankment that creates the dam for the pond. The pond's pretty muddy. I'm not going to make any claims to why it's muddy, but there's been lots of runoff, lots of rain lately, lots of development nearby. So obviously, creating a muddy water there that isn't as pretty as the photograph I showed you a few slides ago. The biggest really challenge for us, and Mr. Brickley mentioned this earlier, is that railroad to the left, because that railroad splits this property into two pieces. The parcel on the west is accessible by Cockpit Point Road, easily accessible once we want to put a parking area and trails. But the eastern parcel, which is off to the left here, you have to get across the railroad track. And as you all know, we can't just walk across the railroad track. So we have access issues to deal with when it comes to the portion that has the Civil War batteries on them and the hut sites, and also the Potomac River. The viewshed of the river there is beautiful. Right now, we can't take people over there unless we take small groups and county vehicles down the railroad track. We can't, that's not an open public access. So that's one of the challenges. There are challenges. We deal with this. We just dealt with this a few weeks ago. This is from a few years ago. This is one of our hut sites. This is relic hunting that took place in the property. Relic hunting is going on out there pretty extensively. We do what we can to monitor the property, but it's very hard. Even though it's in eastern Prince William, it's pretty remote. What you see here is a hole where my cursor is. This is one of the hut sites. So this is where one of the soldiers built a winter hut inside of an embankment. The relic hunter, who uses a metal detector machine, was going around looking for different things, found metal pretty deep, and hit the hearth. These bricks here were the brick hearth of the hut's fireplace. So whatever this person found was below the brick. So as someone that's, you know, trained to take care of cultural resources, this makes me shudder a little bit, because if we don't document what's in the ground, we don't actually study it, we don't learn from it. So it's you know, obviously it's very illegal activity. Lots of heavy fines come along with it. The Virginia General Assembly is working on a bill right now that's passed to you know, make the rules a little stronger when you try prosecuting people that do this on public land. Obviously, if it's your private land, you can do what you want, but I'm talking about public land. So I'll show you one more photograph from 2 weeks ago. This is my coworker Dan. We found these two big holes. Look at the size of these holes right here. Anyone that's ever relic hunted, usually the hole you dig is about 8 inches deep, and you fill it back in. Whoever's doing this digging is digging almost post holes. They found something pretty big and pretty deep. You can see the Potomac River in the distance here. I took a picture of Dan to give you some kind of size reference to the size of the hole here. So it's a challenge for us right now to kind of manage it, to kind of watch it. The County Parks and Rec does have a ranger force that's been very helpful. We've been training them on what to look for. We have cameras out there, but anyone who's lived in Prince William County their whole life knows Cherry Hill, this part of Cherry Hill has been kind of open for people to go up and hunt and use for recreation. It was owned by the Washington Post. It was owned by the developer who had no, you know, management of the property. So it's just kind of used by anybody. So, you know, we're taking property that was just kind of open season and now putting some management restraints on it. So with that takes time. With that takes, you know, trying to educate our neighbors about why we're doing what we're doing. But it's very hard to preserve something when it's being dug like that. It's, you know, it's heartbreaking to me as a historian. And again, I'll just kind of wrap up the history part and the current situation part by just kind of showing you this close-up of the parcel. One thing I'll mention is this land south of the parcel here is owned by Dominion Power as part of their Possum Point power plant. We would love one day to add that to this park. Obviously, that's a decision made way above me, but as you can see, the land, it's contiguous as far as the streams go, as far as the ridge line goes. You can see that pond that I've been taking pictures of is partially on Dominion Power property. There's another pond here that's on their property as well. That's part of this pond. Is, you know, you see their connector at the railroad line there. So we have a good relationship with them as far as having access to their property. It'd be great to add that to the park one day. But you can kind of see that, you know, that eastern parcel here that has the history, you know, sites on it with the huts and the batteries are separated by that rail line. So that rail line is really our biggest challenge. I think David Brinkley talked about that before we got on here about different bridge ideas, and you know, we'll have to figure something out. It's going to cost money, of course, but we'll have to figure something out. I will say that the land does come with $200,000 of proffer funds for interpretation, trails, public access. Obviously, $200,000 doesn't get you much as it did 10 years ago, but it is some seed money, and we have been talking internally with our staff, Brendan Hanif and staff in park planning. We had a kickoff meeting last week, talk about, you know, put some plans in place to add maybe a small gravel lot in this part of the property right here, which has already been disturbed. When they put this tank farm in, all this got really disturbed. So there's a lot of, you know, soil that was pushed into here from the tank farm. So our plan is to, since it's already been disturbed, is maybe put a small lot here. Of course, nothing's been finalized. This is just all discussions. Putting a small parking lot here for public access, and then having trails through this western parcel, just so we can get something open. We got this land about 4 years ago, or 5 years ago now, time flies, but just to get something open, just to get people the opportunity to come out here and enjoy the property, and then, you know, start working with powers that be to try to figure out a way to get to this parcel right here. And with that, Kim, I'll leave it here. I did that fast, but I know you didn't want something extensively long, so, and hopefully we have questions.
Yeah, can you stop sharing your screen?
Let's see. There we go.
There. And Sunny, you had an interesting comment. Do you want to share out loud? And I'm not sure I know what it is. Where'd he go?
Yeah. What I was saying was, I think that the Dahlgren, who I think was like one of the military guys for the Union,
right?
Designed guns.
Yes.
And I'm not sure the type of boat that they use, but the irony of it is they use Dahlgren guns down there, and they subsequently named a base for them, probably what, like 30, 40 miles away.
Right. There's also on the sidebar here, there's at least maybe 1 or 2 Dahlgren guns still in the river from a Confederate ship there off of the point where Marine Corps base Quantico is, where the rail line, if you ever take the VRE from Quantico, right there at that point where the bridge is called Shipping Point. When the Confederates pulled out in March 1862, they sunk a ship there. It's still there in the water, and it still has the 2 guns on it. The Marines did some underwater archaeology about 7 years ago, and those 2 guns are still sitting on that ship under the water. So,
okay. Well, one more question: was there actual, like, I guess, ship, like an amphibious assault there?
The Union troops,
or was it just from the land?
The Union troops did assault a ship called the CSS Martha Washington in Quantico Creek. Actually, the Marines did that, which is interesting. That would be the Marine Corps base later, right?
Right.
But the Marines come across the Potomac and they sink this steamship called the CSS Martha Washington.
Okay.
And oddly enough, that ship is still in Quantico Creek as well. A few years ago, if you all remember, the tide went out and we had a big windstorm and blew all the water out of Quantico Creek. I know our friends at Lisa Van Great sent some great pictures of the water being blown way out, but you can see the outline of that boat. I don't call it a ship because it's just got a steamer. It's still sitting in the mud there, right next to one of the coal ash ponds.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Yep.
Now, okay. Now, so from what someone said that there were houses adjacent to this the place. You know, that we're talking about. I mean, is there a housing development that cuts off some of the access to?
No, so our access would be down Possum Point Road to Cockpit Point Road.
Okay.
So Potomac Shores is all to the west of that.
Okay. Thank you. Great job.
Thank you.
Super informative.
Thanks, Sonny. Sharon Harvey had questions about the ponds. Do you want to ask Sharon?
I was wondering if the ponds were public, and I think you've already explained that. But has anyone looked at the reason why it's turning muddy and where the siltation is coming from? And is it because it's so shallow? What's going on there?
There's different theories.
Mhm.
A lot of it, I mean, I'm not going to take a stand on it, but a lot of it has happened more recently in the past, I would say past 12 months. There's been a lot more development in that area, Potomac Shores was. So, you know, we've contacted our environmental services people and public works, and they're aware of it.
Good.
They're looking into it. You know, but it definitely has not looked that way ever since we've owned it until the last year.
It doesn't take long for a small lake or pond like that to die.
Right.
And you know, because I lived in Montclair, we had several scares.
Right.
You know, early on, you know, and stuff. So that bothers me that it's going to, you know, we're going to set this trails up and everything, but maybe the pond will be gone.
Well,
we don't care for it.
Well, I agree. We're looking into it. So, you know, I'm hoping to have some kind of response from someone in the next couple of weeks. But like I said, like, you know, we're going out there a lot more regularly than we used to. So you know, we go out there about once every 2 weeks. And so we try to document and take different photographs to see how things have progressed over time.
Great.
We've had, you know, there's a third, as you all know, there's a VRE station going in Potomac Shores. They've expanded the rail line embankment for 3 rails. Right now, they only have 2, but they're opening a third into the VRE station. And we had some slopes fail that they have now gone back and fixed.
Wow.
So we find it important to go out there every 2 weeks just to keep by it, because I don't live too far from there, to be honest with you. If I don't go out there every 2 weeks, I'm not sure who is. So we kind of, and my staff, we kind of take we look forward to it. It gives us a chance to get out of the office, and since it's COVID, we can be outside. It's safer, but we go out there every 2 weeks to take photographs and monitor not just the pond, but the relic hunting, and there's lots of hunting up there.
And you can't put cameras or anything up in the trees?
We do.
Okay. That makes sense to me. Now, I also had another one I'll ask you right now, so then I can shut up. Have you thought about getting any of the colleges or historical societies to do an archaeological or preservation dig for you to get that stuff out and in the, you know, in the consciousness, so people are aware that they're destroying it when they go down? Yeah,
definitely. There was a phase 1 done up there, which is a very general overview of the property, so not very detailed. We haven't contacted schools yet. I think our biggest thing is to try to, we do have a management plan, which is great. So we have a plan. We have a management plan that was part of the proffer. A developer paid for that with our input and the community input. We had community meetings back in 2016. So we know what the land is going to be used for. We do know it's eligible for the National Register, so it's eligible to go under state easement.
Oh, great.
Something we want to work towards to get under. We haven't gone, we haven't done the archaeology route yet. I think that's something we want to do. We just haven't gotten there yet, and you'd be surprised how expensive that is.
Well, I can, my son many years ago was a student at William and Mary, and they did the Jamestown.
Oh, yeah, right.
That has been one of the most exciting 3 years that my son had in college. Really. And so I'm thinking that these colleges need to understand that when it's this close, they should take advantage. They should get their kids these experiences, because it will affect their entire life.
Right.
Just saying.
No, you have a great point, and I'm making a note right now so I don't forget that point, because we talked about that, but you know, just like in any job, you got so much going on, right? Our goal right now has been to get something open.
Well, to build a course, and then charge these kids to take this course. And then, that'll supplement a little bit and maybe encourage the college to take this on.
So that's a great idea. And we have some great relationships with local schools. So I wrote that down.
All right,
I said I'd forget.
And thank you, Sharon.
no problem.
CP is interested in hearing more about the bluff. Do you want to speak? And then we can get Eileen after that. So is CP here? Anyway, I think that the question is about how high of the bluff, how high is the bluff? I know the one at Cherry Hill was like 70 feet. Do I remember that right?
This is about that. So it's different elevations. There's some lower points that we own that are on the Potomac as well. The bluff at the height is probably around 70 feet, thereabouts. When they put the RF&P rail line in, they really cut into the hill, the bluff, and that has led to much more erosion. So one of the batteries now is probably 10 feet away from being, sliding down the hill. So when they put that rail line in, they cut a lot back to kind of keep the rail line free of landslides, which it didn't work, but in 1880, that's what they did. So it's pretty high. It's about 70 feet in parts.
Go, Eileen, go for it.
Okay, here goes.
Uh-oh,
Who knows what I'm
uh-oh.
going. Hi, Rob.
Hi.
I live on Quantico Creek Bay on Possum Point Road,
Mhm.
so I'm real familiar with Cockpit Point. And I will tell you, I think I know where the runoff's coming from. And it's called Potomac Shores. And the county was supposed to hire a person to watch over the runoff because of the slopes are so, they're very steep in that area. So that's my comment. The other thing is, having been around that area for a long time, have you found many copperheads?
Let me tell you what, every snake to me is a copperhead. No, I'm just kidding. I've come a long way in my fear of snakes. I'm not as fearful as I was as a kid. No, I have not. We've come across lots of black snakes, but no I'm sure they're there.
They are.
They're pretty prevalent in this part of the county. But we have not had anyone report that, but we've seen lots of black snakes, but no copperheads. Yeah.
But I go up Possum Point and make the turn up on Cockpit Point it's beautiful there in the fall.
Yes.
But I've been watching the runoff. I think it's coming from what I said. So
yeah, it started about a year ago.
Yeah. Well, they're building right up almost next to Cockpit Point Road now.
Right, and we are working with their trails people, talking to their trails people, because they will have a trail that comes out on Cockpit Point Road, and we're hoping to connect whatever trail network we can put into our property with their trail network, so to kind of make it, linear in some fashion. So, but you're right. You drive Cockpit Point Road, and it's all wooded for the most part. It's very pretty in the fall.
Yeah, it is. Thanks, Kim.
So Russ, I'm not sure what water samples you're referring to. Still here?
I was just trying to say, to help you get to the bottom, if you're going every 2 weeks, grab a little tube of water in case it's something shady. You said it's by the ash pond, right? There's no chance of it getting in there.
Yeah, it's pretty, obviously everything is relative, so it's not as close to the ash pond as other parts of the watersheds in that area. But grabbing water samples is a good idea.
Okay, Randy.
Thanks, Kim. Enjoyed the presentation, Rob.
Thank
A
you.
question that's probably of interest to almost everybody on the call. Is the site currently open to the public, and are there any trails there? Thank you.
There not yet. There's no parking or trails. What we have done in the past is we've offered guided tours of the property. So what we were offering up before COVID, we were offering free guided tours of the property. We'd meet people at Thames River Shore, which of course we're in the news today. We heard that it's going to be closing, but we're meeting people at a parking lot just next to Thames. It's the Potomac Shores kayak launching area, the very end of Cherry Hill Ring. And we were shuttling people down in county vehicles to the property and then giving tours that way. We haven't done that since COVID because getting people in the car isn't something we can do right now. But that was the only way that we were able to provide some kind of access to the land. We do have volunteer groups that go out there. The Audubon Society has been out there. Other members of the community have been out there to assist us in kind of monitoring wildlife. Talk about different ways we can provide the access to the eastern parcel. But as far as like unfettered public access right now, we don't have it because there's just no parking or trails there.
Yeah, and you had made it clear that the eastern part was inaccessible through the railroad tracks. I was actually asking about the western part. That's also there's no parking and really no place. Okay.
You know, we don't say people can't hike it, right? So, you know, if you were to walk, if you live somewhere nearby and you can walk to it, you can walk on it. It's not restricted to be walked on. You can walk it. There's just no parking for people right now. There is a cul-de-sac there by the asphalt plant, but they get kind of edgy when cars park there. So we don't really encourage that publicly. So that's our goal. I mean, that's something that we've been working on for about a year now, is to figure out, working with Supervisor Bailey's office to start using these proffer funds to find a way to open this property up for trails and for at least just kind of hiking access, just so people can get to it. We've owned it for 5 years now. I think it's time for us to let the people use it. So hopefully the next year. Hopefully we don't get sidetracked, but that's our goal.
Good. Yeah, Russ has a question about disc golf, which maybe is a joke. I'm not sure.
Oh, no, it's not a joke. You wanted to get it open as fast as you could. There's no trails. Put in 18 disc golf baskets, and the people that play the game will make you some trails, walking back and through there.
That is true, but in our management plan, and you know, it will be under easement. That probably won't be an allowed use of the property, but you know, it would definitely get trails made. You're right about that.
But you're right. Just bringing a lot of feet through a place, really, it's amazing the difference.
Yeah, and we definitely want to be, you know, we have some good staff in our park planning office. We want to be able to plan trails where they are appropriate. It's anyone's ever walked that land. It's, like I said, it's very steep. There's lots of high ridges, so we don't want to add to any destruction going on out there now with the watershed. So we're going to have to place these trails in good spots, and you know, make sure we follow those contours of land to do as less damage as possible.
Well, that's good to know. Kelly. Kelly, you have comments, questions? You should unmute. I see your hand up.
All right. Yeah, I wanted to talk about getting over the railroad tracks. I think that'll be your big difficulty if that's a goal of yours in the future. They tried to do that with the Featherstone National Wildlife Refuge, and getting over the railroad track has been the biggest stopping point so far. So I don't know, maybe you find another solution about how you access that eastern part of the property, but just a comment about that.
I will say that we have talked to the tank farm. They do have a pedestrian bridge that goes over the railroad track. Of course, obviously it's contained within their fenced-in area, so it's not a public bridge. We've talked to Potomac Shores, who they are supposed to be putting in a marina north of the asphalt plant and south of where Tim's is, somewhere in there. And we talked about trying to find a way to access from their parking area down the eastern side of the railroad track into our property. But again, the asphalt plant is there. So it's not totally impossible. Obviously, I prefer a bridge of some sort, because even if you got access from an eastern parking lot, like where the marina is going to be, you still can't connect the two parcels. You can't go from point A to point B. You have to get back in your car, go back, come back, right? You couldn't walk the whole thing. So it's not a perfect solution, but that would be maybe a solution. But again, a lot of that rests on what Potomac Shores plans are with their marina in the future. So that's kind of out of our hands a little bit. But the asphalt plant there is aware that we're interested in somehow getting through their property some way, some shape or form. But you know, it's a very long conversation, because of course, as you just mentioned with Featherstone, when you deal with CSX, you got Homeland Security because of the rail line. There's lots of different things, that hurdles you have to go through. It just takes time. My problem is I'm not very patient.
Well,
I'm learning it.
yeah. The other comment that, I mean, why do you need to do anything with that property? It seems like, maybe just managing it for what it is, try to figure out why the water's turning. But I mean, people don't really have to have that. I mean, there's all kinds of other places people can go. And it's nice to have some untouched land. I mean, you got industry all over the place, surrounding it. Why not just leave it the heck alone?
Yeah, and I think that that's been discussed. But I think when the land was proffered to the county, it was for passive recreation. So it might be out of our hands a little bit, but that's why our plan is whatever we do in there is very minimal. You're not going to see, huge gravel trails everywhere. That's not our plan there, at least not right now. Nothing we've ever discussed. It's very minimal. But it's going to be a natural environment hiking trail. We're looking at ways of making some of it accessible, but it's very hard because the slopes in there are huge slopes. So accessibility may be an issue for some of that park, because you just won't be able to get there at the degrees of elevation you need for ADA trails. But yeah, whatever we do in there will be very minimal. I mean, that's been our plan all along, is to kind of have a place you can go out and do wildlife observation. And if we can get to the eastern portion, we'll introduce some history. If we can't, we'll just wait until that time comes.
Very nice presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
And Sunny, well, before we move on, I would also just like to comment, Kelly, that if you have a really fabulous natural area, and Featherstone is a good example of this, and nobody can go there and nobody knows it's there, when it's threatened, there is nobody to protect it and to stand up for it. And so we're up here in Northern Virginia, where all that space is at such a premium. And it's sad that you have to think in those terms, but I mean, that's definitely how things played out at Featherstone for a while. So anyway, Sunny was also asking about Kim Brace and the Historical Commission. Are they playing any part in this?
The Historic Commission, their role originally was with the development approval and the proffer process. But we do coordinate with them a lot. I go to all their meetings once a month, the second Tuesday of the month, and we update them on what's going on. Our role with the Historic Commission or something like this, we would work with the two commissioners from this district. We have a great relationship with MA and Yolanda Green, who are the Historic Commissioners for Potomac. And so our work with them would be more directly with those two commissioners, because they represent this district that we're working in. So yes and no. I would say yes, we do, but not, the Historic Commission was mostly involved in when the planning process was going on, because their main role is to do plan review, looking at cultural resource uses. So they were definitely involved in the process to preserve it and get the proffers to us.
Thank you. And Sharon Harvey just wrote a note that if it's true that foxes eat black states, you could dump your foxes off at her house.
Be careful what you wish for.
That's and Lori has a comment about something in Germany with wildlife corridors and connecting places. Are you here still, Lori? I think she was talking about going under the railroad tracks.
Oh, I did see that, yeah. That's been discussed as well.
Also
So,
in Germany, they do those big broad bridges where they actually have like trees and vegetation over the top of them. So it's not just a little narrow metal bridge or something crossing. It's a wide, almost, I don't know, as wide as 2 lanes of a road, but it's all natural. It's not metal. And I mean, I guess the foundation is probably cement and engineered properly, but then it's green on top of that. And a couple other things that they do over there as well in the forest is they have something called kletterwalds, which are rope courses, oftentimes right on the edge of a town. And they're tons of fun with kids and young people where they strap themselves in and go from A to B on different levels of courses. I know that, insurance wise, I'm not sure how it works in America. It's a little different, but it is super popular and people, sign up in advance with a specific time and they show up, all, throughout the day. So, but that's something
Thanks, Lori.
that's very natural. It's, I mean, you wouldn't, if you were just hiking, you wouldn't unless you're looking up into the trees, you don't know there's really something there. It's not destructive on the base. So, anyway,
Thanks, Lori.
you're welcome.
And Linda, and then Valerie has some comments.
I think you should share the pictures that Dave sent you, because we're talking about the bridge and he has given good examples of that. And so if you can share the pictures.
I only got them 5 minutes before the program started.
I know, but can you share them or
I'm
no?
not sure.
Okay.
I am not sure because they're still in my email. I haven't even opened. I just saw the little tiny.
You can
But
also share them with a follow-up email.
I was going to say, we'll put them in. There's just 3 of them and we will send the follow-up email and put them in there. So sorry, Linda, but I need them a little bit sooner than that. And, oh, Valerie, who monitors the beautiful bluebird trail on Cherry Hill, had comments about bluebirds.
Yeah, Kim, I know that Potomac Shores is like the bad guys here, and believe me, I perfectly understand it. Every week during the summer when I go up there and I go, oh my God, there's more building. But there is a gorgeous bluebird nest box trail on the golf course, which is incredibly productive. And I am so protective of that trail that I won't let anybody else monitor it but me, because it is so peaceful to go out there. Having said that, Rob, when you open up the site for the county, I would love to see a bluebird nest box trail go in there. I know it would be incredibly productive. There are lots and lots of bluebirds and tree swallows out there. So keep me in mind.
We will make that happen. That's a promise.
Okay, now in the nothing ventured category, do you want to, I can share the pictures. My idea worked perfect.
Don't break Zoom, Kim.
Yeah. Let's see here. There's one. Oh no, but I can't do. There's another one. These are the pictures you were looking for, Linda?
Yes.
And that's just beautiful, huh?
Yeah.
I don't even know where these are. So is this what you're looking for?
Yes, I was thinking if people could see them while we were talking about possible bridges, they'd know that we had been talking about it before. And David got these pictures to the Trails and Blueways Council. And one of them is in Perth.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the one in Perth or not. I'm not recalling that they charge for, and it actually brings in income. And it's so breathtaking that people are willing to spend money to go out there. I think he said in the council that it was like $25 to go on it. I don't know if that would be too much. And besides, you're going to have somebody out there to collect the money. But this is all thinking about what we can do. And so I thought it would be good to see a possibility of bridges over the railroad tracks.
Yeah, and Gary wrote a comment about a swinging bridge, which I'm not familiar with. You want to?
Yes, hello, Rob, Gary Haskins here.
Thank you.
But in the National Forest on the trout streams in Virginia, I encounter a lot of swinging bridges up in the National Forest, and they're usually just large enough for one person to pass at a time. But they, you know, given other possibilities, it would seem like they'd be relatively inexpensive to do it something like that. I could probably dig up a picture, but it would take some time. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, and then Dave, who raised his hand against a wall that's almost the same color. I almost missed it. There, that I can see.
Thanks, Kim. There's at least three birders on this call, and I since nobody else has stepped up, I figured I'd say a few words about the birding history of this area. We've been birding Possum Point, Possum Point Road, Cockpit Road for at least 10. I've been birding it for at least 10 years, and I'm sure some of the folks have been here longer, have been birding it longer than I have. But this is probably one of the premier places to go. Used to be one of the premier places to go in the spring to see migrating spring warblers. And it's a very reliable place for things like summer tanager, worm-eating warbler, probably breeding Louisiana water thrushes, just a really nice habitat. In recent years, we've encountered a number of problems with the remediation folks at Dominion Energy, telling us we can't even pull off on the side of the road, just chasing people out. I've given up going up there. I don't know, some people have maybe a little more endurance than I have, but the fact that we have potential access on a permanent basis to this area is fantastic, and we really look forward to it. I'm hoping, I'm looking at the county mapper, and I'm looking at the parcels, and it looks to me, and Rob, you correct me if I'm wrong, it looks to me like there's not going to be any access from those developments onto Cockpit Road. That's not Cockpit Point Road. That's
only trail access, no car access. No.
So there's going to be, so the trucks to the asphalt plant are basically the only traffic on that road. We used to bird that road. We just used to park and walk along the road because there was no traffic. We just every half hour there'd be an asphalt truck going past, and we get out of the way. But so the opportunity to actually walk through that property is we definitely look forward to it, and we hope there aren't any obstacles. But that certainly is good news. And sorry we have to lose everything on the north side of the road, but at least that property on the south side, and especially the pond, I think is going to be very good for the future. So thumbs up from me. And I don't know how the other fellows, I don't know if Phil and Dave are still tuned in, but if you want to chime in, I'm finished. That's my piece. Thanks.
Any birders want to chime in?
Well, I think a gravel lot with 6 or 8 spots near the asphalt plant would be great.
That's what we're thinking. And it's pretty much exactly what you just said. Which is, it's amazing how expensive even that is. So, you know, with permitting and you know, site plan, because we still have to pay all that. You know, no one in the county government's going to give us a pass on any of those fees. But yeah, that's pretty much what we're planning, what we're looking at right now.
Any other birders? And Neil, you put up a one-word question that I'm very curious about. I don't know what you mean, Knoxville, but I see you're still here.
Those bridges were from.
Huh?
Those bridges, yeah, I thought he got them from Knoxville or Gatlinburg or something, somewhere in town. Train stations.
Okie doke. Anybody else have comments, questions, ideas to share?
I sent you 2 images of those bridges and 2 samples in Germany, but I don't know how to share them to the main screen. But I sent them to your email, Kim, if you know how to share them.
Oh, you want me to go look?
If you are tech savvy and know how to do it, some people can just like do it in a heartbeat, and other people like me have to struggle through it.
Do you have an attachment on it? I don't see it.
I just put it right in the message.
Oh, it's not coming up in my email.
I don't know if I can. Let me see if I hit paste here. Maybe it'll paste an image. No, it didn't.
Again, we can put them up on the web or send them with the follow-up.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you, though.
No problem.
Okay, I don't see any hands up or comments that I missed. If I did, now's the last chance.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I thought it was terrific.
I didn't want to, I could probably give you a 3-hour talk about the history of the Civil War and the batteries, but I didn't want to do that. So I was trying to, I was looking forward to the question and answer period the most. So anyone has any interest in learning more about the property, historically speaking, our website, pwcgov.org/history. We have stuff there. And I'm sure, Kim, you can set up my contact information if you want any follow-ups.
Yeah, and the website. And maybe we'll come by and hit you up for phase 2 here.
Yep, and you know, if you ever, you can always try to meet out there as a group sometime when we can do so safely and walk the property.
That would be really fun. Thank you so much, Rob, and thank you everybody for coming. It's nice to see everybody